Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to another episode of Contemporary Islamic Issues and Concepts on Huda TV. I'm your host, Arqam Rashid. In this episode, we will be discussing the concept of Salafia in Islam. What is this concept and where does it originate from? So let's start off by welcoming our wonderful guest, Sheikh Asim Al-Hakim. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the show.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa jazakumullah khairan.
Wa iyaakum. Sheikh, so this is a topic that is much needed nowadays. You have this word thrown around everywhere around the world, all over the Muslim countries. So we want to start with the very basics. We want to start off by understanding what the concept is. Is it an Islamic concept? Where does it come from? So let's start from the very basic. What is this concept of Salafia?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillahi wa alihi wa sahbihi wa man ihtada bihudahu amma ba'd. Salaf in Arabic means the thing that came before. So whatever came before is a salaf. So whether they're our ancestors, whether they are people who lived long ago, they are called salaf. And those who follow and came afterwards are known as khalaf. So they would come afterwards. And the terminology as-salafiyya is referring to our righteous predecessors, as-salaf, as-salih. And the scholars differed in identifying them in the sense that it is not an Islamic terminology per se that people used to use and throw right, left and center, but rather it's a description. So when you say salaf, you are actually in contrast with those who do not follow the righteous predecessors. And who are the righteous predecessors? The Prophet ﷺ said, خَيْرُ الْقُرُونِ قَرْنِي. The best of the generations is my generation. Then those who follow them. Then those who follow them. So what is meant by generation? Is it 100 years? As the word qarn means a century. Or is it a generation that it's a level of people? So by this definition, generation of the Prophet ﷺ includes him and his companions. This is a generation. Then when they passed away, the following generation were known as at-tabi'een, the followers of the companions. And these are those who had seen the companions of the Prophet ﷺ. And when they passed away, the third generation are those who are known as tabi'it tabi'in, those who did not see the companions, but saw those who saw the companions. That is it. So these are the righteous predecessors, or a salaf as-salih. And the Prophet said, ﷺ, they are the best of generations, meaning that whatever they come out with, whether it's related to Quran, to Sunnah, to knowledge, then they should be the elite and the best of all.
Okay, Sheikh, so let's start with, nowadays, do you think that there are different types of Salafis? You have many groups that say, okay, we're Salafi, and another group that says, no, we're following the pious ancestors, and another group. So is there different types, or is it one correct way and others that try to claim the title as well to show that they're on the right path?
See, a Salafiyya is not a political party. And it's not a school you say, I went to that particular school and I graduated from. A Salafiyya is a way of life, a way of committing to your religion and adopting the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. In Islam, what counts is not the title, but the actual thing. Al-ibratu bil-ma'ani wa-laysat bil-mabani. So the structure doesn't count. What counts, what's in that structure. And this is portrayed clearly in the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, narrated or reported by Imam Muslim, where he said that Allah does not look at your bodies or at your wealth. So whether you're black or white, whether you're tall or short, whether you're rich or poor, Allah Azza wa Jal doesn't look at that. But rather He looks at your hearts and your deeds. This is what counts with Allah Azza wa Jal. So now if you look at this from that perspective, you understand that it is not what people claim. Because everyone claims to be a Muslim. Everyone claims to be upon the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. But there is a deviant group, they call themselves Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah, and they have nothing to relate to Sunnah nor of the Jama'ah of the Prophet ﷺ. So there are different groups, each one claiming to carry the torch. Each one says that I am on the correct path of the Prophet ﷺ. You have Salafia ilmiya, you have Salafia jihadiyya, you have Salafia from that country or following that sheikh, and they all claim to be Salafis, but not necessarily any of them is on the right track.
Very interesting, Sheikh. So if it's not a political movement, then would you say it's a school of thought, like the four famous schools of thought that we have throughout history? Is Salafiyya a part of the school of thought, or is it a separate school of thought? Is it a school of Aqidah? What exactly is it then?
See, again, you cannot pinpoint exactly what Salafiyya is, because it is not something that people have classified and underlined, saying that this is Salafiyya and whatever else is not. In a nutshell, Salafiyya is adopting the way of the Prophet ﷺ and his companions and the best of all generations. In what? In Aqeedah, in fiqh, in the methodology of thinking and adopting the right rulings from the Quran and the Sunnah. And this is why when scholars speak about the way of salvation, they always say the way of salvation is to follow the Quran and the Sunnah. Everybody claims to be following the Quran and the Sunnah. No, they put a condition. They stipulate another rule by saying to follow the Quran and the Sunnah with the understanding of the righteous predecessors. So one would jump and say, do you want us not to think? Do you want us to freeze our minds and blindly follow? No, you don't blindly follow. You understand the Quran and Sunnah with their interpretation, because they were the closest to the Prophet ﷺ. They were fluent in Arabic and they were the masters of Islamic sciences. So they understood what it is almost difficult, if not impossible, for you to reach their understanding. While you read it and learn it, you know why they concluded or they they came to find such a ruling from it. Therefore, the way of the Salaf is not a school of thought. And so many times people say, Shaykh, is it a fifth school of thought? In addition to Hanafi, Maliki, Shafi'i and Hanbali? I said, no. The four schools of thought, the Imams were Salafis. I said, how is this possible? Akhi, because of the definition of Salafiyya. Where did they get their knowledge from? In Quran and Sunnah. Were they making up, or they were dependent on what the righteous predecessors used to say? So once you know this, you find and realize that they were actually Salafis. And there isn't a fifth school of thought that is the Salafi school of thought. No, this all falls under it.
Many people say that the Salafi ideology calls for the rejection of the four schools of thoughts, calls for complete separation from the four schools of thought, that if you follow the Salafi ideology, then you can't follow any of the madhahib, you can't follow any of these four schools of thought. So is this true, or is this an allegation?
I believe that this is a very big lie, and if not a lie, it's a misconception. Because the real Salafis follow the four schools of thought. However, we have to point out a very important issue, which is, are the four schools of thought infallible? Are they something that was revealed to these imams and their disciples, that it is part of the religion, if I go against it, I'm a kafir? No, this is definitely not the case. We all agree that there are other schools of thought that might have been more important, but not as famous. Al-Thawri, Al-Awza'i, Abdullah ibn al-Mubarak, Al-Layth ibn Sa'd, all of these great scholars of Islam were as strong and knowledgeable, if not more, than the four imams of these schools. But they didn't have sufficient students to spread their madhabs worldwide like these four imams had. So we have to understand this, that the origin of all is the Quran and Sunnah with the understanding of Salaf. However, we cannot come and simply cross out these four schools of thought and say, I am a Superman, I'm here to study the Quran and Sunnah, and I don't care about anyone else. This is completely unacceptable, because these four schools of thought are based on years and years of contemplation and studying the texts from the Quran and Sunnah and gathering all the different views of the companions, of the tabi'een, etc. And this is the juice. So if you come and say that I'd like to bring something out that no one else had ever thought of, this is complete deviancy and against Islam. So one must not reinvent the wheel. You have to begin where others ended and carry on by evolving whatever they had put forward.
Sheikh, I have a few more questions relating to the four schools of thought and the Salafi ideology, but before that we're going to go for a short break. So as soon as we come back, inshallah, we will continue our conversation on the concept of Salafia, so stay tuned. Welcome back to Contemporary Islamic Issues and Concepts on Huda TV. Now, before we took that short break, we were discussing the concept of Salafia in Islam. Sheikh, right before we went for that short break, we were discussing the relation between Salafia and the four schools of thought. Now, I wanted to ask you, if somebody ascribes to the Salafi ideology, does that mean he has to choose a specific madhab? Or does that mean he picks from each madhab that he wills? Or does that mean he doesn't follow any of the madhabs at all?
Okay, there are two concepts here I'd like to clarify so that maybe we can understand this a little bit better. One concept is aqeedah related to the fiqhi practices, and the second concept, how can we classify people in terms of their knowledge, whether scholars, students of knowledge, or laymen. So going back to the first concept, it is a misconception among Muslims when you hear us saying that the four imams were Salafis. So people think that, okay, so if I meet a person in the streets and he says, I'm a Hanafi, then this means that he is a Salafi, or he's a Hanbali. Not necessarily the news. This is not necessarily to be accurate, because there is a difference between being a Salafi in aqeedah and a Salafi in your fiqhi choices. And the combination, and the best combination, is to be Salafi in both. What is the difference? The difference is that Salafi in aqeedah means that you follow the aqeedah of the Prophet ﷺ and his companions. What is wrong with the other aqaid? There is a great deal of wrong, because when you come to the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that my ummah will be divided into 73 sects, all of them are in hell except one, you know that the difference of the 72 sects with our sect, or with the mainstream of Islam, is in aqeedah. Not because you put your hand below the navel, or you don't raise your hands when you say Allahu Akbar, then you're not a Salafi in this sense and you are part of the 72 sects. No, these are minor fiqhi differences. The main difference is in Aqeedah for those who, for example, say there is no physical hell or heaven. This is a breach of Aqeedah. For those who say that Allah is all hearing and all seeing, but He doesn't hear and He doesn't see. Those who deny Allah from His beautiful attributes or names. Those who say, for example, that there is no punishment in the grave. As a lot of Mu'tazila say this. Those who say that if you make a major sin, you're a kafir. Like the Khawarij. So these are the sects that are in hell. The difference between us and them is not in fiqhi issues, whether you can shorten prayer when you travel or not. It is in essential issues of Aqeedah. So if a person is called as a Salafi, then definitely his Aqeedah is on the right track. Now when we come to the four schools of thought, this is a minor issue. And you can be a Salafi in Aqeedah and a follower of a Hanafi madhab, no problem with that. But to be a full-fledged Salafi, you must purify your belief, your conviction, the practice of your Islamic rituals through filtering it through the understanding of the Quran and Sunnah with the understanding of the righteous predecessors. So if you're a Hanbali, good for you, but we know that being a Hanbali, 80% of your practices of fiqh are in accordance to the Sunnah, 20 are not. And the same goes for Maliki, for Shafi'i, and for Hanafi, with percentages going up or less, depending. So what to do? This brings us to the second concept. The second concept is, should I pick and choose? Should I cherry pick? Should I do what? Now this is dependent on the categorization of people. People are categorized into three sections: scholars, students of knowledge, and the wide range of laymen and the masses of the Muslims. So scholars are those who have gained real and true knowledge. What kind of knowledge? Of everything. Quran, Sunnah, Arabic, Usul al-Fiqh, Nasikh, Mansukh, the whole 9 yards. So these people are qualified to come up with their own opinion. From out of the blue? No, be careful. It has to be based on the opinions of the previous generations. And that is why Imam Ahmad, may Allah have mercy on his soul, said, be careful and do not say something or adopt an opinion and you don't have an imam. There was this individual, let us not call him imbecile, let's just call him an individual. Sheikh, you just called him imbecile. No, he's an individual. He says that I came to this conclusion. What conclusion? He's a linguist. He says, I know Aramaic, I know Hebrew, and I know this and that, and I came to understand what is Alif Lam Ra, Kaf Ha Ya Ain Sad, Ha Mim. He said, it is in Aramaic language, and it means, oh man. And this one means listen. And the third one means so and so. And he was, answering himself. He says, people ask me, how come you know something that none of the Muslims in the past 14 centuries came up with? He said, I don't know how the companions overlooked this. What? This is my recent discovery. This is an ignorant imbecile. Because having something that all the Muslims did not know, the Prophet did not know, the companions did not know, and subhanallah, you only know it, this defies logic. And it also defies the Quran, where Allah says it is an Arabic Quran. And he's saying, no, there is Aramaic things that only few people know the meaning of. So this is the category of what? The scholars.
Scholars.
Then we have the second category, which is the students of knowledge. Students of knowledge are the scholars in the making, but they're not yet still ready. So these people don't come up with their own opinion, but rather they do comparative study of the fiqhi schools of thought available, and they come up with a conclusion because one of these fiqhi thought is correct and the rest are not. Because the correct opinion, the truth at the side of Allah, is it one or multiple? There is only one. You cannot say, Akhi, this is halal, but it's also haram at the side of Allah. No, it's one of the two. One of the two is correct and the other one strived to do the correct answer but failed to do this. And both are rewarded at the side of Allah. Students of knowledge come and they cross-examine evidences. They look into the different books of fiqh and the different schools of thought, and they reach a conclusion based on analysis, not based on desires and whims. And here you can tell who's a Salafi and who's not. And I'll give you an example.
Sure.
Everyone praises and acknowledges the status of Bukhari and Muslim. Now, one of Mufradat Ahmad, meaning that Imam Ahmad only had this opinion and he went against the rest of the three Imams, is backed by a hadith in Sahih Imam Muslim. The Prophet ﷺ was asked, shall we perform wudu from eating mutton meat? He said, if you wish. Yeah, meaning it doesn't nullify your wudu. In the same hadith, so the companion said, shall we perform wudu from eating camel's meat? The Prophet said, yes. Now, the majority of scholars say it is not a must. Who should I believe? I'm a Salafi. I apply the hadith. And the hadith is crystal clear to me. One says, Shaykh, but the majority of scholars say you don't have to. Who do I follow? Again, it's not Luke, Mark, John, and the four Gospels. This is the Quran and the Sunnah. So if the hadith is crystal clear, it's in Sahih al-Imam Muslim, I definitely, as a Salafi, follow the hadith. Especially because Imam Ahmad had said this, so I follow an Imam. Not because I want to or I desire to do so. And this is how a student of knowledge selects. The last category is the layman. Layman can be a professor in university, can be a surgeon, neurosurgeon, can be a pilot, can be a businessman. But when it comes to Islamic studies, he's the layman. I remember once in college, I attended Physics 101, and I was awful in physics. And the doctor was explaining in the first class, and I said, I don't know what this guy is talking about. So I left the class and I dropped the course. As I was leaving the university, I saw the doctor opening the hood and was unable to put the car in gear. And by coincidence, I knew how to fix it because I had a like 1974 model that was similar to it. So, Assalamu alaikum, alaikum assalam, what are you doing? He said, I can't put my car in gear. I said, no problem, open the hood. He opens the hood, and I click something, and the gear is fixed. Oh, wow, how you do that? I said, well, if I knew, I wouldn't have dropped the course, because then that would have done something for me. Which means that being a PhD holder in physics with lots of research work doesn't mean that you're good in mechanics. And being a sheikh, for example, in Islamic studies, doesn't mean that you can extract someone's tooth if it's killing him. Everyone has his own speciality. So laymen who don't know knowledge, these people are requested to follow an imam because they cannot say whether this hadith is authentic or not, whether the verdict from this ayah is correctly stemmed or not. They don't know the difference between hadith probably and an ayah.
Okay, Sheikh, we're going to conclude this episode, but we'll continue our conversation inshallah next episode. Dear viewers, join us again to continue our discussion on the concept of Salafia. And until then, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless us all. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa